Now to wrap us up for our final session today, please hit us through the Q&A icon if you've got any questions you want to ask of an independent security trainer, speaker, and Microsoft Regional Director, and the founder of the Data Breach Monitoring Notification Service, Have I Been Pwned? Please welcome Troy Hunt to the stage. He gave you a bit of a word up there. Look at you.
That was all right, wasn't it?
He was all right. He spoke about, but then again, I mean, this is you, mate. This is your Mr. testifying in front of Congress. Take us back to where the idea for Have I Been Pwned first percolated. Was there a eureka moment in this for you?
Just a bit overwhelmed about seeing people again.
Yeah, that's a bit weird, isn't
That's
it?
the first thing. I mean, my eureka moment for Have I Been Pwned was probably the Adobe data breach. So in 2013, Adobe got hacked, 150 million-ish accounts, and I was in there twice, which surprised me because I didn't think I gave my data to Adobe. And then I didn't think I gave it to them twice. But I was a Macromedia user, and I had used Dreamweaver from Macromedia, and then Adobe bought it, and my data went in there, and I was like, well, if I don't know my stuff's in there, what about other people? They mustn't know either. Yeah, oh, this will be a bit of fun. I'll stand up and some of my mates will use it, and I'll see how it goes. And now here we are with like NCSC founder talking about it.
Put some numbers on it. How big is Have I Been Pwned now?
There's 11.6 billion-ish records in there at the moment.
11.6 billion records.
Yeah. It's a lot of cloud.
Was there a turning point where it went from being a fun? Did it instantly go massive, or did it bubble along for a while and then there was one big thing that pushed it to the next level? Do these things grow in a straight line, or do they plateau then jump?
It's all kind of relative. I mean, it was December 2013. It started very small, but it got a lot of unexpected exposure really quickly, which I found quite strange because there are a few other services out there that did similar things. And then over time, it's just gradually gotten bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where today there's about 300,000 people a day that come to the service. But of course, then there are peaks, right? So the Facebook phone number thing a few weeks ago, there was about 6 million people in a day that came to that. A couple of years ago when we had the Collection 1 stuff with 732 million, I think, unique email addresses. I've got about 10 million people a day to the service. So there's always peaks, but it just keeps gradually getting bigger and bigger. Are
there nasty agents out there who think it would just be funny to bring down that site by definition? Does it get much heat on it?
And look, it probably does, but to be honest, a lot of it just goes unnoticed. Partly it's just behind Cloudflare and they keep a lot of nasty stuff out. But partly also, it's super, super simple. I mean, what you see on the front page is basically what it is. It's a page and like an API behind it and a few other things to try and stop abuse of the API, and that's about it. But it's a bit like anything that you stand up on the internet will immediately start getting hammered by bots trying to find vulnerabilities and admin.php pages somewhere or other.
What about more traditional, the old way of bringing things down is through legal recourse? Is it a universally popular site, or has it ever had legal threats against it? What would be criticisms, or what would the enemies of the site want to do to it?
It's been pretty good lately, I think, because people have been preoccupied. Like the last year and a bit, it's like we've got bigger things to deal with. But I mean, never anything serious. Most of the time it's like, I didn't give you permission to have my data. And it's like, well, yeah, mate, you didn't give the hackers permission either, but like here we are and it's all over the place. So what are we now going to do about it? So look, I've just added all the bits I can in terms of that there's opt-out and there's multiple ways of opting out. And what gets really funny is people like, I would like to opt out. So yeah, no worries. And I would like you not to load any more of my data in there, but I don't want you to have my data. And then I'm like, how am I going to know not to put you in there again if I can't have you and the fact that you don't want to be in there later on? So you get these weird kind of little cycles. But no, look, there's never been anything serious in terms of legal stuff. I had one company, it's a company called Adult Fan Fiction. So if you can imagine, like if you really like to read about like vampire and Ewok porn, like together, you would go...
Sorry, just go back. Vampire and Ewok porn or together.
It's a real thing. It's,
okay.
After you go home, Google Adult Fan Fiction. So it's a real thing. So they got breached and they weren't real happy that I told people they got breached after they wouldn't reply to my emails. So they said, we're going to like send the lawyers. No one ever sends the lawyers after him. That was about 4 years ago. No lawyers yet, so that's all right.
Let's have a look at the photo here. Here's you testifying in front of the US Congress. Where did the overture come from to be there at the, this looks, may I say, you look the part. And what I love about it is you've got Like they're the three typical sort of people who end up testifying before US Congress. Dude in the middle looks like he's mafia boss who's about to roll over and incriminate people. Dude on the right looks like the old-time American lawyer or congressman. And you look like the young, up-and-coming Republican superstar who's about to have some hideous sex scandal just explode all over him and completely... Anyway, that's just me. How did this come about? What was it all about?
Incidentally, check out my socks. So I had the coolest socks because I had these socks I got from Sophos, and then they say, for those about to code, we salute you, and there's just like this bearded dude on the socks. I thought it was fun. It was kind of interesting because I'd had a chat to some people in Congress before where they had just general questions about data breaches, and we had a little bit of to and fro, and very often, like someone reaches out and they want to talk, and particularly if they're government or law enforcement, I always find that particularly interesting. So we're like, yeah, we'll have a chat, and I'll go and sit in the backyard and have a little talk. And then at some stage, someone was like, oh, can you come and testify in Congress? I'm like, you know I'm Australian, right? Like, do you really want me to do that? And I'm like, yeah, it'll be fun. You should just do it. And I did it. And it was just super, super interesting. And yeah, it's just kind of like one of those momentous occasions.
What was Congress investigating at the time? What was on the agenda that you got an invite to the dance?
So it was the impact of data breach on knowledge-based authentication. So their position was, you know how when you call up your bank and you're like, hey, I need to make an inquiry or something. And they're like, yeah, we just need to make sure you are who you say you are. What's your date of birth? And you're just going, oh, crap. Like the thing, that immutable piece of information that's just all over the place. So they were interested in how do all these data leaks impact our ability to authenticate people. So there's just lots of questions around, what's causing these breaches? What are we doing about it? Is it going to get any better? And I don't know that we sort of solved everything while I was there, but hopefully we gave them some food for thought.
What were some of the points you raised that you think landed with them or they really needed to hear? What do you think you got on the agenda or on their minds?
So I crowdsourced most of my answers. Like I wrote a blog post saying, hey, I'm going to Congress, what should I say? And someone gave me a really, really epic quote that I've used over and over again. And they said, what you should tell them is that organizations look at personal data as an asset and they never look at it as a liability. So they accumulate as much as they can because they feel that they can monetize that or turn it into something better later on. And they never look at it and go, well, this could actually increase risk. So that to me was the one thing that always sticks in my mind.
With it, we saw there were those little mashups and edits of Zuckerberg, et cetera, testifying before Congress. And they were going, how do you possibly make money out of a free website? Oh, we run ads.
Sell ads.
And so some of the Congress men and women looked pretty silly in some of those edits, and like they really had not even got their head around colour TV, let alone the internet. Is that? But then again, I'm mindful that's like a 1-minute edit that's being done possibly with the agenda of trying to make some of these people look pretty silly. In your experience, were they across their turf? Were some of them remarkably ignorant? Some were incredibly well informed. What was the actual quality of the interrogation you received?
I think, first of all, there are 1-minute edits of all of us that frankly make us look pretty silly. You'll find it.
My life is just a series of 1-minute edits making me silly, often joined back to back.
The thing I think is really interesting particularly when you watch TV and you see even politicians here in Australia, that these folks have got to go from a hearing like this where it's data breaches and cyber and things like that, and then they've got to leave that, and then they've got to go and they've got to do hearing around, in this case, the next thing they're doing was like a hearing on the opioid epidemic. And I know absolutely nothing about that topic. So these folks have got to be high level enough that they can go across all of these different things. And then what's really interesting is that they have staffers behind them who then go deep on each one of these topics. So I spent a lot of time with staffers doing the cyber stuff, and they were really, really smart, switched on people. You'll never see them because they'll never be in front of the camera, but they're the ones who advise the congressmen and the congresswomen who are inevitably grilling the three of us here. So I guess I have a lot of sympathy for how far they need to spread themselves across things. And the trick then for me was like, all right, well, how do I talk to these people in a way that they're going to understand me, so it's high level enough, but then there's enough detail that they can take that to the staffers and they can hopefully do something useful with it.
There's a great question here. Are they RM Williams boots in the photo? If so, it's a nice Aussie shout out.
Yep, absolutely. So a fun story, I had to buy every single piece of clothing you see in there because normally, like I live here on the Gold Coast, I got dressed up to come here. So I had to, except for the socks, which I got for free, of course. But yeah, I I bought a new pair of RMs. I was like, yeah, let's take a little bit of Australia to Congress.
On that point, taking Australia to Congress, so without, pissing in the pocket, as they say, people here, but you've experienced this on the world stage. So industry by industry, I'm always fascinated with what's Australia's reputation internationally and what's seen as our real strong suits or weak spots. So as an Aussie testifying on this, what are the thoughts about Australia in the cyber security area? And are there any particular areas of strength we're seen to have?
Well, I mean, I think Australia is looked at as a pretty innovative country, and we've got good success stories here. I mean, all right, Casey Ellis is here, Bug Crowd. Great success story of folks coming from Australia, talent coming from Australia, and making it big on the world stage. So I feel that we get to punch above our weight. I mean, we've got this tiny, tiny fraction of the people of somewhere like the US, yet we do get to represent through initiatives like that.
One of the questions that's popped up here, how long until I can look up if my biometrics have been pwned? And that's the sort of, that's going to be a space eventually, isn't it? That's going to be something we should be just as worried about, or?
Well, yes and no. I think the biometrics is really interesting. So people say, if your biometrics get stolen, you can't change it. All right, first of all, you can, it's just not much fun. But you can't change it like your password. So therefore, the biometrics is always identity, it should never be authentication. But these are not like interchangeable things, and there's a really simple test why. If you get my password now for a service, you know immediately what to do with that. Let's say you get my Netflix password. You sit down there and you go netflix.com, put in the password, job done. If you get a good look at my thumbprint, what do you do next, right? So you got to, and I've never done this, so I've just watched some James Bond, so I can kind of figure it out. But what you do is you got to get a clean enough print, and then you got to get gummy bears, and you got to melt them down, and then you got to turn them into prosthetic, and then you got to try and fool a biometric device, and you've got to do it within X number of goes, otherwise it locks out and falls back to a pin or something like that. So I don't think we can ever sort of compare these two the same way. And even if we could, no, I'm not putting it in have I been pwned. Imagine sitting on people's fingerprints or something in there.
Got a question that's just come through. Troy, you're pretty active on social media with pictures of your personal life. As a security professional, does that concern you?
Oh, I got a really fun story about this. So someone was trying to dox me the other day, and this was after I left commentary on Gab. So if you don't know what Gab is, it's where all the really right-wing, particularly very racist-leaning folks went after Trump got booted off Twitter, and they're like, we'll just go to Gab and we can, free speech, just be as evil as we want over there. So anyway, they had a breach, a whole bunch of stuff leaked, and I covered it on Have I Been Pwned. I loaded data, I left some commentary, which was like 90% just here's the data and 10% here's my views of Gab. And someone got very upset about that, and they went and I'm going to air quote this, they doxed myself and a whole bunch of other researchers that were involved in this, trying to find every piece of personal information they could, creating a dedicated website, putting photos and stuff up there. And I looked at mine, and there's like photos of my kids, there's photos of my fiance, and I'm like, every single one of these photos I decided to publish publicly, and you're having so much trouble now actually figuring out what's meant to be out there versus what's actually legitimate doxing. So I actually thought it was very funny, and it reminded me of something a few years ago. A mate of mine said, look, if you can never remove bad stuff about you from the internet. The only thing you can do is flood it with good stuff, and then it makes the bad stuff really hard to find. I'm not saying like there's bad stuff about me as far as I know on the internet, but I think when you willingly provide that much information, it sets the narrative around your life. So yeah, I thought that was funny, trying to dox me with photos I'd published.
Anonymous asks, as a regional director of Microsoft, how does it at all, Microsoft affect the running of the site or what you can or do or say in the public eye?
So I'm a Microsoft regional director, which means I don't have a region, I don't direct anything, and I don't work for Microsoft.
Nice, that sounds like
it's a confusing title, and it's cool in that people go, oh, cool, this sounds really fancy, and it like opens some doors. But it is like an honorary title. If you go to rd.microsoft.com, it explains what it is. I am entirely independent. It's very much like the MVP program in many ways. And they have absolutely no influence whatsoever on whatever I do. And if there was a data breach tomorrow on Microsoft.com, you'd see that on Have I Been Pwned. But I do a lot of stuff with them. They give me some Azure credits. I think I pay for pretty much everything else from Microsoft. But yeah, it's just no influence whatsoever on the way I operate.
Here's a question that was actually posted for Kieran Martin, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Do we see a time, this is Jay who asks this, do we see a time where we'll have an offensive coordinated response to root out criminal organisations that are doing the data breaches or the hacking, or will it always continue to be this sort of, well, it's happened, here's your name if you did get affected, well, that's the way it goes?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we've had the FBI proactively removing web shells from that Exchange Hafnium stuff the other day. So maybe that's like a step in that direction, but then proactively and offensively rooting them out outside of a formal law enforcement construct. I don't know. That would have been a really good question for Ciaran, actually. So, yeah.
Where are we? And what I find fascinating about this whole space is that one of the reasons I love coming to AusCERT is I see what you're talking about here that then becomes the mainstream on an 18-month to sort of 3-year time lag. You know, this gets out into the real world and becomes standard practice. But where are we at on that journey in this space? Is it static, or will we be dealing with these things substantially differently in a couple of years?
I think to Ciaran's point before about learning from the 2016 election and then things being very different in 2020, it's showing that we're evolving and learning because everything around us is evolving very quickly. And I think what makes this industry particularly fascinating is that every day, it feels like every day anyway, you get up and you go, well, I didn't see that coming. Like, that was new. This has gone in a different direction. So I imagine if we look back at this in 18 months, it will be like looking back 18 months in the past where we go, well, things have progressed. Some things have gotten worse, some things have gotten better.
This one, considering the amount of valuable information you've received and held over the years, how were you able to do this legally? Have you had any problems?
That's a good question. Are there any other questions? I think the answer is a combination of things. So as many people know, I was going through a merger and acquisition process with HIBP a couple of years ago. I was just getting so big, I was like, all right, let's go and find a new home for it, a home that can help it grow. And thank God that didn't happen for various reasons. Come and ask me later at dinner if you want to know. But one of the things we learned through that as KPMG went through this sort of basically pitching the whole thing, and we had all these lawyers pouring over it, and everyone's trying to figure out this question. It's like, is it legal to run this service? And lawyers being lawyers, they came up with the position of, we invite bidders to form their own opinion on the legality of this service, which is basically, we don't know, work it out for yourselves. And even if we had got to a conclusion, it's like, legal where? We're much more liberal with privacy law in Australia than what they are in Europe. And Europe in general is more liberal than Germany, and that's different to other parts of the world. So to be honest, I just keep coming back to this point where it's like, look, data breaches have happened. What's the best thing that we can do now? And at the moment, I think this is the best thing we can do now. And if it gets to the point where someone says, look, you just can't do that anymore, well, okay, we won't be able to do that anymore. And hopefully we'll be able to find another way of doing it.
Is it the sort of thing, you talk about that, making it bigger and having a platform for it to grow on? Is there, I mean, has this ever had the potential to be another $1 billion unicorn?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
But it's one of those interesting things, isn't it? Because I find in the broader sort of digital space, sometimes like you look at things happening in cryptos and NFTs at the moment, things that I struggle to see what the actual value is being valued off the planet. At the same time, something like this that does such an important job, but possibly isn't that easily I know that's not your drive in doing it, but is it the sort of thing that would be easy to monetize?
But it's a good question, because that came up a lot during this M&A process, which was, where was the value? And the really interesting conclusion out of that was that a lot of the value is in trust and brand of me running Have I Been Pwned? Because every time we went, well, what if you just took Have I Been Pwned? And I go off my jet ski for the rest of eternity or whatever. And everyone's like, no, like there's just nothing in it. So it seems to be the trust in people popping up and going, I would like to give this data to Troy so that we can then do something with it. Which is really interesting, because then you go, okay, well, monetization side aside, like, where do we go with this? How do we make this thing so it ultimately becomes self-sustaining without me? Because I have like one bad jet ski accident, and it's like, what happens now?
I'd like to do one question here. When testifying before Congress, how many variations of the word pwned were there? And someone else asked, have you thought of changing it to have I been wrecked, R-E-K-T, to keep up with the young people? I love the use of the word pwned in it. Where did that come from? And is that part of the sort of beautiful attraction of the whole project?
Because I never expected it to do anything, I really didn't give it much thought. I was just like, I need a domain. Yeah, I always try to buy a domain name lately. It's like, this is so hard. It's this one's available, I'll just take that. And I never really thought much more about it. And then over the years, of course, people have come up with all of these variations in their pronunciations. So I own so many bloody domain names because of the way it's pronounced. It's like I have I been pawned, spelt exactly as you'd expect it to be. I have I been prawned, because Americans. And then there's all these other kind of strange variations. And every now and then someone says, oh, maybe you should change the name to be like more socially acceptable. I'll be like, no, this is fun. I like this name. Why would I do that?
Couple of quick ones. Dushant asks, what's your opinion on passwordless authentication, especially the two-factor authentication shift to what you have and what you are?
So in a nutshell, I love the technical implementation. I think it's the usability side of it, which is difficult. If you don't believe me, try and set it up for my parents, see how you go with that. I think it will be a larger part of things over time, but the one thing that passwords have going for them, which so far nothing else has been able to do, is usability. And I mean that simply because all of us can go to our parents or our less technical relatives or whoever else it may be and go, do you know how to use a password? And then they'll go, yep, fine. Do you know how to use a U2F key? A what now? Or a soft token? Try migrating someone's soft token after they've migrated their phone and they didn't migrate the token and they didn't save the backup codes. And so, yeah, I think we're stuck with passwords for a long time because of that.
Anonymous, how do you deal with GDPR?
We invite bidders to form their own opinion of GDPR. So I've actually had multiple discussions with regulators in the EU and with folks in GDPR, and I've literally had this discussion of data breaches are happening. They kind of don't comply with GDPR because hackers. What should we do now? What is the best thing to do with the fact that there's all this data floating around? And frankly, even regulators can't wrap their head around what do we do after this illegal activity happens. So it literally just boils down to that the legal basis for processing it's one of the 5 in GDPR. It's basically the one which is that this is a community service which requires data in order to operate this way. If anyone gets upset, we provide the provisions to be provide the provisions to be able to remove the data, and then we hope it doesn't get worse.
David O'Brien asks, why are we losing the ransomware battle despite all our good work? And to quote our Prime Minister, do you accept the premise of the question that we are losing the ransomware battle? And if so, why are we, despite all our good work?
I feel like it's the question of are we losing the battle against clipping our fingernails? Why do I have to keep clipping my damn fingernails? Every time I do, I've got to clip my fingernails. It's one of these things which I think has to be maintained. You can't just stop or it continues. You never get to the point where it no longer happens anymore. And I think what we're doing with ransomware is maybe just changing some of the ROI. And I mean, as an example of that, ransomware in recent years has gone from being attacks against availability to attacks against availability and confidentiality. So we get things like that Finnish psychotherapy thing the other day, where it's like, hey, we've ransomed your data, please give us Bitcoin. No, okay, we'll just go to every individual in the data breach and ask them for Bitcoin, otherwise we dump their psychotherapy records.
Couple of quick ones to finish. Do you think cloud-based MFA services like, I think it says Authy, A-U-T-H-Y, are a major security risk?
I think they change security because you're saying, would we rather, I mean, Authy is usually soft token for two-factor authentication, but if we look at other means of authentication where we consolidate Auth into one location, you put a lot of eggs in one basket, but then look at the places you take the eggs away from. How good a job are many websites doing of actually maintaining our usernames and our passwords and everything? So we change the risk as opposed to necessarily making it holistically better or bad.
There were a couple of different questions. I'll tie them together in one. One question was, did you drive your jet ski to the conference? Another question was, are you still offering the guitar lessons? And another question was, the rest of us males are going bald. How the heck do you keep that perfect head of hair? Can I suggest the perfect head of hair has something to do with the fact that you ride a jet ski and play the guitar? Is it just a general lifestyle thing? It seems like things are working all right for you in 2021. You've got a fiance, you've got your jet ski, you're giving guitar lessons, you've got the perfect head of hair. We fucking hate you. I think it sounds like things are in a good place for you at the moment.
I don't play guitar. If anyone wants to know, they'll Google my name, guitar lessons. It's a Ricky Gervais joke, but yeah, for the most part, things are pretty good.
Excellent. What's your take-home message from all of this space for the audience here?
Honestly, I think the take-home message is that this is a very good industry to be in at the moment. I mean, it is amazing when you look at it, right? Like the amount of opportunity in this industry, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's, you know, you can sit there on the one hand and go, oh, there's crap, we're getting hacked by everyone, and then there's the Russians and all the rest of it. Or you can go, isn't this wonderful? There's so much opportunity, and it's such an exciting place to be in.
The glass is always half full.
I reckon it is, yeah.
Give Troy a massive round of applause. Thank you so much, mate. What a fascinating session. Great stuff, great stuff. That's us done for the day. Now, before you depart, please make sure you take all your personal items with you. There are bins located at the back of the room if you want to help us tidy up. In order for the star team to prepare for tonight's gala dinner, we're going to vacate the room as quickly as possible in an orderly and socially distant fashion. Friendly reminder, the pre-dinner drinks start at 6:30 in the Garden Events lawn. If at the last minute you can't make the dinner, please let us know at the Rego desk, because there are still a few people who are really, really keen to get in there. And don't forget to bring your Lego bird kit for the Speed Build Challenge at tonight's dinner. For those of you we don't see the dinner, we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Otherwise, see you here in a couple of hours for the dinner. Thanks again, Troy.